our victim impact statements that the jury has heard. They have really been amazing. We've been listening to them a lot this week. The judge dismissed the jury, and they won't be back into session until tomorrow at 12:30 p.m. Now, before I go on the break, I want to discuss with my guests about the amount of victim impact statements that the jury is hearing. So, Doctor, I, as a seasoned prosecutor, listening to these statements, found myself choked up. I was watching my guests on the show prior to the audience seeing it, and they were teary-eyed and choked up. My producer was talking about how she was choked up. What I found very interesting was all of them came down to the same thing. They all had survivor's guilt. They all had grief. They all had anger, of course, and they can't even live their lives minute by minute, day by day. They can't get away from it. That's been the experience that I've seen as well from the victim's family in homicide cases. What does their life look like after this? Is there, when they talk to somebody like you, is there any way through this, or will they forever be, like they are saying, lives negatively affected because of it?
Well, I don't know that you ever completely get through this. And I've worked with a number of people that have survived mass casualty attacks. And the people that end up being the most successful and having the best prognosis after something like this is the people who find meaning from it, who don't allow themselves to wallow in it. They remain sad. They deal with their grief. They acknowledge that what they went through was traumatic, but they find a way to move forward. And in the clip that you're showing right now, you can see Alex Schachter, who is Max Schachter's dad, who was killed. And one of the things that he's done, which I think is amazing, is he's been a huge advocate for school safety. And so you see a lot of times after a mass shooting that there's a couple parents who find purpose in that, and that's one of the most healing things that they can do.
Doc, I want to go back to you on this, on an observation that I made. Everybody's amped up about the trial. The victim's family there, the victim witness advocates, and it's about winning the case, and you go through this 2 months of fighting, and then guilty comes out. This is my experience as a prosecutor. And while there's that momentary huge satisfaction, the other thing I've noticed is the impact that has on them in 2 specific ways afterwards. One, it eventually settles in. That's it. There's nothing more. And 2, to the point that they live it, I literally had a call just the other day from somebody from 30 years ago who was a witness, a victim witness in a murder case, who's still calling to ask questions about it. The other thing that I've noticed, I guess it's the third point, is how some families can implode because of this. The husbands and wives breaking up, families arguing and breaking up, where I understand it's like usually they want to come together, and they do in the beginning. There's just so much pressure. What's happening in that pressure cooker where their relationships just implode?
Well, there's a lot happening. People handle grief very differently. And if a family doesn't grow together with it, if you have one person who's stuck and another person who wants to grow, it can easily it's easy for one of those partners to become resentful. And I think that you're completely right about it's like, okay, that's it once there's that guilty verdict, because it doesn't feel like justice has truly been served. And so people really have to change their expectation about what that's going to look like. And I hate the term the new normal, but that's really what people have to do, is they have to establish what their new normal is going to look like and adapt to that.
Florina, the testimony in this case and the victim impact testimony has been so incredibly dramatic to so many that are watching it. I think it's important for us to explain to the audience and our viewers. Some may say, they got a defense attorney crying at counsel table. How could they possibly represent an animal like this? That would be the phraseology. Talk to us about the importance of what the defense does in a case like this.
Well, look, we have a constitutional right to counsel and a constitutional right to have law enforcement follow proper procedure. You have a right to a trial by a jury. You have a right to, a lot of things. The attorney's job, the defense attorney's job, is not to argue innocence. And in a case like this, there really is no question that he did it. He already pled guilty. So that's not the question. The question is, Is he going to get a fair trial? Will the defense attorney keep things out of evidence that maybe are interesting but are too prejudicial and are not probative of the issue here, which is whether or not for the sentencing phase he should get the death penalty? The defense attorney's job is a check on the balances of those legal scales to make sure that your constitutional rights are protected.
And I have to be honest, it may sound counterintuitive. I felt that way as a prosecutor as well. I liked good defense attorneys because we're not omnipotent. We don't always get it right, and our perspectives and points of view sometimes are contrary to maybe what the best interest of justice is. So they help with regard to that. Doctor, if you're consulting the defense team here and trying to develop some mitigation, I know you haven't evaluated Nikolas Cruz, so it's not a fair question without that clinical interview, but where do you suspect their psychologist is going in terms of trying to present to the jury why he should not be executed?
Well, if I was hired, what I would be asking are a lot of questions related to like an early onset of psychosis, something that shows that his, that he had some faulty beliefs. I would point to the trauma and tragedy in his life, and just try to present him as an incredibly damaged person who felt that this was the only way out.
Right, yeah, and I think that is something, FLORINA, very quick, 10 seconds or less so far, overall trial. What do you say? Is it going to be a death penalty or not?
I think his age is the biggest defense here, and I think if they can, in a compelling way, argue that he can be changed, maybe the jury will be sympathetic.
All right, well, ladies and gentlemen, there you have it. I mean, you have really two cases that we're covering here at the Law and Crime Network, both tragedies by their own right. Each one, the jury is going to have to make a determination, one on the Alex Jones, whether it's slander and whether or not it's a First Amendment protected activity over the Sandy Hook school shooting, and now you have this at Parkland. So we'll see what the juries are going to decide.